Hello and welcome to another episode of Mordred's Community Multiplayer EU4 Political Chat. I'm joined as always by Brother Zale. Zale, welcome.
Hey, nice to be here again.
So I guess we'll start real quick, high level overview, where we stand in the game so far from a great power perspective. Spain, number one, uh, pretty much, yeah, not much stopping them at this point. Great Britain, 2, Ottomans, 3, Russia, 4, Portugal, VJ, Qing, and Malaya rounding out the rest of the great powers. You see here we've got Spain well on its way to the naval hegemony, and at maximum power, an additional 20% RD damage from the back row. Uh, will be pretty powerful once that unlocks. Any thoughts on our great powers as of now?
Um, yeah, I think Jamie, or not specifically Jamie, but I think Spain, the way it's been played, has been a no-brainer for the first slot. Especially given how much damage that Asia has managed to inflict on both Russia and the Ottomans. Even though they didn't really win, I'd say, any of the wars that they've been in with either of those powers, you or Calico's Russia. I think that the amount of eco and manpower damage at the times when those wars were fought is one of the major things that contributed to the way the Great Power List is kind of shaken out. Because I feel like if you hadn't had to fight those wars and then immediately turn around and go fight the war against Russia and Sweden, then you probably would still be the number one great power. Especially if you'd been able to break through India a lot stronger, especially that first war. It'd be pretty hard to stop you at this point.
And we'll jump right in. That's a good segue. So last week we fought on opposite sides, the never-ending Battle of Afghanistan. I walked away with 3 million casualties in 2 provinces. At the time, I think it was a total of 16 dev. Maybe put a little more dev into them since, but quite a bloody war for limited gain. We started the session, quickly declared on Rajput, was able to uh, bombard or barrage and assault Kalat and get it before Rajput could challenge. That allowed me to fight on flat terrain for the majority of the war. There was some back and forth, but from my perspective, it seemed pretty inevitable that once I broke that mountain fort, I was going to win that war. What were you guys thinking?
Um, I don't know. There's kind of a lot to unpack there. I don't want to get too much into it, but um, VJ and I gave quite a bit of advice to the Raj player before session started. I don't feel like he necessarily followed what I would consider to have been the wiser course of action. He did a great job, but for instance, I was suggesting to him that he should have released Afghanistan as a march, and then um, given that Kalat fort and stuff to him to the march, and it would have boosted the defensiveness from I think 20ish to 90. But that aside, I think we kind of were holding out to hope that the war with Russia would happen sooner. I don't know necessarily that VJ nor I thought we could really successfully defend Raj after how quickly you were able to take that fort. But I think that we were, at least I was hoping and expecting Russia to invade you while that was going on, because I knew that a war between the two of you was pretty much inevitable that session. Um, and I don't know. I think in the end we did a pretty decent job of holding you. Once you did kind of get through the flatlands into the hills on the other side, we were able to inflict enough casualties that stopped you from getting, basically getting a huge peace deal. But I would agree probably with the assessment you made that your victory was relatively inevitable after you were able to take that fort as quickly as you were.
Yeah, and Raj took a decent amount of economic damage. We're taking a look at prosperity map right now. Leading into the session, this whole region was prosperous because the majority of the wars were fought throughout here. All that prosperity is gone. Takes quite a bit of time for it to come back. So that's a decent hit from an economic perspective. VJ continued its expansion through Bengal, and now, even more so than last week, is the dominant Asian power. Manpower, 600k to Raj is 300, and Nepal's cheesed 500 through their tributary mechanic, but only 200. From an economic perspective, 100, 200, 550, 3, 3. So Raj gets a little bit weaker, VJ gets a bit stronger. Um, I did make a deal with the Rajput player that I will honor. As you mentioned, there was a war over in Europe that we'll touch on in a little bit. It fired towards the end of this war. I made Rajput an offer. I said, accept this deal for these 7 provinces, or 6 provinces or so, and I'm done. Never coming back. This gives me a decent amount of trade power in Guj through once I'm able to integrate my vassal. So I'm happy with what I got. But looking outwards into India, what do you expect to see this coming Saturday?
It's hard to say. I don't know how eager Raj is to try to regain land from you. Because I mean, of course, you said that you wouldn't invade him, but said you wouldn't invade the Mamluks and stuff. So we'll see how much we believe that in the upcoming sessions. But it's going to be interesting because Raj is, I think, gonna have to.
So I did not invade the Mamelukes until they essentially had no protection because they had missed so many sessions.
Yeah. Either way, skepticism in the voice for the viewers. But either way, I think it's gonna be interesting to see what the Raj sort of decides. Because let's assume that he does trust you and he settles for the deal. He doesn't have a lot of other ways to expand. As you pointed out, BJ is much stronger than he is at this point. So, if he wants to betray VJ or me to expand, I don't think that'll work out for him. Just period. He could work with, for instance, VJ against me, but VJ would just take the Burma land and then get into China, and he would have to go through all the worthless Tibet, and not worthless, but the relatively not nearly as lucrative, I should say, land there. So even if they did that, it wouldn't get Rajput anywhere near the amount of benefit that VJ would be getting, and instead it would be killing me, who's one of probably his more staunch allies at this point, I think. And yeah, I don't know. It's just gonna be really interesting to see what Raj does. He probably is gonna start playing tall. That would be my assumption. He's got a lot of really good farmland and stuff, especially in that Jaunpur area. So he could if he spends time building up his land and that sort of stuff, he could do a pretty decent job of building tall and getting a lot of dev that way. But we're so late into the game. I don't know that it's ever gonna be enough to make him. One second. Random cough. I don't know that it's ever gonna be enough to make him as powerful as he was or could have been.
Yeah, he's got a tremendous amount of underdeveloped grassland and farmland along here, so there's quite a bit of power left to be pulled out of these states. But as we shift a little bit further to the east, Japan was in a slightly tricky spot politically. I think Great Britain players may have listened to the whispers that he was putting in people's ears. Great Britain was trying to play every side of the Qing, Japan, Malaya relationship, trying to get 2 of them to go in on the third, and eventually Qing and Malaya went in on Japan. Japan no longer exists. Is this the end of the wars in the east?
Meh. I don't know. Hard to say. I don't really know that Qing and Malaya are going to continue fighting. Like all Qing really wanted was his cores back from Malaya. And we tried, like I said before, we tried to work out a deal there. It didn't work. They went to war for it. But I think that after that war, I think they're going to have a deal now. And I don't know. Kaiser, bless his heart, but he just came off the back of betraying Fuhrer as Lotharingia. And then the first thing he did, as far as I'm aware, is get a deal with Great Britain, and then tell Qing, "Oh no, it's fine. We'll make a deal," and then come to me and I asked him if he wanted to invade Qing and stuff, and was trying to test the waters there, and he was all for it. So we kind of were like, all right, this Japan kid's got to go. And we figured that if he did make a deal long term, if he did make a deal with Japan, at a certain point, I'd imagine that guy would probably just either turn on him or take everything of value and leave him sort of status quo. So I think that's what the inevitable decision was for Ching and Malaya. I wasn't really a big part of that, but I have to say I'm not too surprised. Perhaps if he had honored the deal with France, there would be or rather, if he had betrayed France and then not taken the deal afterwards, so he'd still be a very strong Lotharingia, or if he had just taken the original deal in the first place with France, perhaps the situation wouldn't have been the same. But then again, he'd still be over in Europe, so I guess we really wouldn't be talking about it. But it was an interesting move for everyone involved, and it's going to be interesting to see how, especially Portugal, who has scoring range, but also of course Britain, how they're going to take. I think Britain might actually have scoring range. How they're going to go from here? Because yeah, as you pointed out, Portugal's already invading. We'll see how that kind of changes the dynamics of the region as the Europeans get a more significant foothold.
And now we'll pivot over to Europe. You mentioned before the large war this session. Essentially, major players were Sweden, Russia, Prussia, and the Ottomans. Sweden declared a coalition war, which allowed France, and Great Britain was also involved. But if you watched that guy's stream, it was clear that he didn't commit his armies. His colonial nations barely committed as well. They were just preparing for a conquest of the Netherlands, which he executed shortly after the war concluded. But Prussia, Sweden, Russia, Ottomans fought quite a bit over Germany, as you can see. Prosperity is gone. Ended up technically a white peace. Great Britain paid Prussia a good amount of ducats. I was a little unhappy as the Ottomans, as we were, I think, 3 to 4 war score away from being able to stab Sweden out for land. So Prussia chose to just end it and take the ducats and attempt to rebuild. As you can see, they're still in a very healthy spot. What were your thoughts as an outsider on the war?
Yeah, I think that the war and how it came out, it was a bunch of well-intentioned and well executed misplays. to make it brief, from the very beginning, like I was saying, I thought that Russia should have gotten involved against you while you were still over in India, and I think that goes to show they had basically sieged out all except for that very last fort of Prussia by the time you were able to get your troops over, and that's even after you finished the war. If you were still at war with India at the time, I don't know that that war would have ever been winnable. I don't really know because I couldn't see the armies, but
No, so a little insider information. Rarely the Prussia player, he was hovering on the unconditional surrender button right as my army showed up, and we were able to then stalemate and then push back against, we'll call them the Allies. So the British and the Russians and the Swedes and the French.
Yeah, so I don't know why they waited that long. I'd been talking with, especially with Calco, the entire time because I knew we were going to declare on India, so I was being in session, so I was trying to get him to get more involved sooner, and I think that was the waiting to declare war was probably the ultimate decision that lost in that war, and I do think that war was lost. I agree with you. I didn't really understand why Prussia didn't.
They also used a coalition CB, which pulled France in. So their thought was, France, let's just come over the top, add a little bit more troops. It backfired significantly because the war goal becomes show superiority in a coalition. Prussian quality is hard to beat on the field, even if you are pushing them back. So they were never able to hit that 50% mark to stab us out, and I don't think the benefits outweighed the cost. If they had chosen a CB for a province, they would have been able to get over that 50% threshold and stab Prussia out.
Yeah, and if you ask anyone, but especially Sweden, they'll tell you, if we had taken Lubeck as the war goal, would have been a completely different war, completely different story. They would have been able to peace out the moment your troops showed up and started winning, whether or not you'd been at war with India. And so yeah. I don't want to I don't want to rub their noses in the dirt or anything. They everyone knows the mistakes they made when they play. So it's just one of those things that's kind of sad to see that they made that mistake and it cost them so dearly. And then Prussia, in my opinion, made the mistake of not waiting for that just a little bit extra, especially since you guys could have started invading Sweden, at least the Danish part of Sweden and parts of France, and would have been able to kind of hurt their eco a little bit more before piecing out. And you could have done the stab hit after doing that. You're pretty safe from everyone. Jamie wasn't interested in fighting you. You had truces with India and then anyone else of consequence you were already at war with. So it's kind of interesting that at the point you were winning, you guys weren't going kind of all the way. But perhaps the money did a lot more benefit that you got from Great Britain. Did a lot more benefit. It's hard to say.
And a few other players in Europe, you mentioned Spain, largely spent the session consolidating their holds on Italy. Um, and then Netherlands, the purpose of the war that Great Britain engineered was essentially to put a truce between them so that they couldn't defend the Netherlands. They swooped in as the day the White Peace was declared. Switzerland stayed out of it for the most part, sent some Condot. Commonwealth was originally a Prussian ally, but essentially got bullied by Russia into breaking that alliance and allowing access of Russian troops. How do you think politics in Europe are going to shake out moving forward? I guess the question is, where's the next war occurring? Because it's obvious that Prussia, while they took some damage, is largely unscathed. Um, they probably didn't get to dev as much, but they're still quite a powerhouse. Great Britain got what they wanted out of it. Sweden essentially got nothing, and Russia got nothing. So, what are your thoughts moving forward?
Um, for starters, I'm not really surprised. In my opinion, Prussia and the Commonwealth haven't been allied since Prussia allied the Ottomans. Um, Allied you, that is. Uh, and the way that guy played that war and immediately invaded Netherlands afterwards. That's classic that guy. It's kind of what you have to expect from playing with him. He's a very I'd say a very honest player, and he'll stick to whatever agreement he makes, and that's as far as he'll go. Um, and you kind of always know where you stand on with him, and that's why I tried so much to get for the Asians to not try to make any deals with him, because you can just sort of expect this sort of behavior from him. And I don't think it's bad either. I think it was pretty well played. It's kind of sad that it immediately backfired on him with this war he's now kind of locked into, because I don't think Prussia and his allies can actually get over that 50% that they need. So this is almost going to be an eternal war, and that guy still has enough trade power in the Channel from England alone that he can basically sit in it as long as he needs to. So for the next war, I don't see any reason. It was a white peace, 5-year treaty. I don't see any reason why Sweden and Prussia aren't going to go back to war again as soon as that treaty's up.
It's actually been up for a while now.
Well, then I imagine you guys are waiting for this session, so I think we would see a very early declaration this session then.
So I think I disagree there. We had to wait for the same treaty to be up to go in on Great Britain. Sweden and Russia could have jumped in quite a while ago. It's been over 8 years, so 13 years since the White Peace, and Sweden and Russia stood by.
Yeah, but the difference there is Prussian quality is basically, I think, capped out as high as it can go, which is really, really high. Highest in the game, but I don't think Prussian troop quality is going to get much better, other than Western pips. But that's the same. It's basically going to keep the same ratio with Sweden and Russia.
They actually have an age bonus in the next age.
Yeah, but I mean, okay. But I'm saying other than the age bonus, you're right. But other than the age bonus, their troops are relatively where they're going to be stagnated at. Same sort of ratio of overpowered compared to other troops. But you, on the other hand, are going to be, as time goes on, your pips are going to fall off. I think they'll eventually curve up again, but there's going to be that sort of valley of power where your guys are going to be, your troops are going to be the lowest quality they could possibly be. Prussia's not going to yet have that um, age bonus, and all the while, Commonwealth is able to build up. Russia is able to build up. Both those nations are nowhere near where they could be, and so I think that's why I expect a war to be declared by you guys early next session, because while you still have really strong armies, and before you start to fall off too much as the Ottomans, before Russian Commonwealth and stuff have ability to build up so much, I'm thinking you're going to try to exploit that and try to get as much damage done. So when that valley does hit, you can the Russians and the Swedish and the Commonwealth troops aren't going to be able to exploit it because the damage you've already done, they're still trying to recover from.
Interesting. And I just want to pivot for a moment now and touch base on the New World, which is one of the most upsetting things about this season in my mind is the hug box that it's become. There's been very little, if any, tension between the colonial powers, Great Britain with North America, um, Spain with Mexico, the Caribbean, and South America going to Portugal. Do you see any conflicts happening in North or South America?
Um, yes, but I think those conflicts mostly will just be for just to fuck around and have fun. I don't think that they're going to be uh, significant. I could be very wrong, but it's just the way it's been played so far. Unless Jamie really wants to shake things up, which is possible. I know I do it just for the memes, I guess. Um,
New Spain
but
is quite a rich colonial nation right now. Albion also relatively rich. Brazil pretty rich. The Caribbean extremely extremely rich. There's
yeah,
so much money here, and everyone's just singing "Kumbaya."
yeah, and I think that that's really because of Great Britain being able to get the Cape. If Ethiopia had managed to stop their expansion into Africa and especially um, beyond, that wouldn't have been an avenue for, or as easy of an avenue of getting involved in. And it's been pretty hard still, but I think that let there be hope. In other words, and so you see that guy kind of thinking more to himself that he doesn't have to get involved with Portugal and Spain in this really hard war that he doesn't want to have to fight, when he can just instead meddle with politics, and now can probably invade and take land from Japan, and he's barely had to lift a finger, right? All he had to do was whisper in some ears and you know um, get Kaiser to come talk to me, sort of thing, and not that he forced him to or told him to, but you know so I think because that option was open, which all boils down to when Britain was able to secure as much of Africa from the Ethiopians as they have, I think it basically assured that there was going to be relative peace, because colonial nations can't expand beyond their colonial borders until they get independence, are given independence, right? So, what are you going to do when you have a fully built out Albion that can't go any further, or fully built out Smooth Jazz that can't go any further, or Peru or Colombia, right? What's the point of fighting a war against Portugal, trying to take Texas, when you could just wait for Asia to weaken itself and sneak in and get a few hundred dev there.
Yeah, I wonder moving forward if there's anything that can be done to shake things up from a colonial nation perspective.
Yeah, I think probably the most interesting thing that could be done, which would um, I think essentially ruin Portugal and Great Britain, would be to let a lot of these nations go independent and fight it out amongst themselves. I think that'd be kind of fun and interesting to see how that would shake out, or maybe have like a North America versus a South America battle. But like I said, economic wise, that would kind of ruin the old world. Maybe if Martian wanted to leave and play as Brazil, leave Portugal, let Jamie have Portugal, and then play as Brazil, that could be a thing. But otherwise, if those nations don't go free or aren't allowed to expand past their borders, I don't think there's going to be much change otherwise.
Yeah.
I don't imagine anyone's going to invade Alaska too much. Even if they were allowed to expand past the borders, it's not worth a whole bunch at the moment. And also, everyone enjoys playing with Mind Boy, so like, why would you want to kill him? Especially as I think Qing is going to start finding himself bordering European powers, and with not a lot of continental enemies, I think you might see him getting more and more involved in the New World. I don't know that for a fact. It's just me thinking. But if he's going to be fighting potentially a Great Britain and Japan, why wouldn't he also want to fight Great Britain with Alaska on the continent, right?
And I believe you won't be joining us this Saturday, so I'll switch up the question. Next week you come back. What changes do you expect to see on this map?
Can't hear, but I gave a heavy sigh there. Is Ethiopia at war with Great Britain right now?
No.
Alright, I expect to see Prussia either bigger or smaller. I expect there to be a lot of territory, not a lot, but a significant amount of dev traded hands up there. And if Prussia expands into France, who's relatively isolated, then I would expect Ethiopia to likewise expand into French Africa. They don't have a lot of paths of expansion otherwise, and perhaps they won't. Perhaps I'm misreading that really wrong. They don't really have any aggression between them, but I expect that Jamie will have all of Egypt, of course, and I expect that you'll have most of Arabia. But I think there might be some peoples trying to sneakily get in there, and I don't think it's going to be India. I think a lot of people expect it, and they might, but I don't think it'll be India. I think it'll be someone else. And then I would expect Georgia either to be basically gone or to have a huge amount of Russian dev at the end of this war.
Interesting. Well,
Yeah.
look forward to seeing what happens, and look forward to speaking with you next week.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you, man.